Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fashion Unfolded. My name is Katie.
My name is Cameron.
And this is episode 1 of our brand new podcast. We're going to jump right into it, but for a little bit of background, we are 2 students at the new school, particularly in Parsons School for Design. Cameron, can you tell us a little bit about why we decided to start a podcast?
Yeah, I mean, we had such a range of fashion media that feels like it's out there, and nothing is really quite fitting for where I feel like fashion needs to be. And you've made some great points about, finding a middle ground between fashion academia and kind of the state of fashion of Vogue, where it's just like, what are we really talking about with that? So we want to find that space and make a little bit more, do more in terms of fashion history.
Yeah. We are going to be leaning on some of the things that we've learned in the course of our master's program called Fashion Studies, where we study the sociocultural, sociological, anthropological, historical phenomenon of fashion. So we're going to be bringing in that little bit of an academia side, like Cameron said, a little bit more of that journalistic side, and see where it takes us.
It's a true intersectional experience here. We love to bring the disciplines in.
I think where I'd like to start for today's episode is just introduce ourselves, why we wanted to work on this podcast together, and maybe a little bit about our own research and what we might do with that research going forward.
Yeah. You want to kick it off?
No.
Terrific. I'll kick it off. So, as I said, my name is Cameron. I came to this master's program with a background in sustainable fashion. For years, I'd been doing communications and events for sustainable fashion brands. I'd worked with the Department of Sanitation to do their Refashion Week program. And for me, this is kind of just a logical progression from that kind of work. I feel like there's so many stories to be told within sustainable fashion, within secondhand pieces, but across the fashion spectrum. And so I've really been interested in the intersection of social justice in fashion, the intersection of football in fashion, football being soccer, because I am from the Caribbean, and we're going to, get into that kind of football more than anything else. And yeah, just kind of fashion culture across the diaspora, because there are so many stories within that that I feel like are really universal and aren't being told. And I'm really excited to use this as a platform to tell those stories, the program as a platform. My thesis is on the use of subversion in I should remember this. It's all I'm doing right now. Use of subversion by the Black Mardi Gras crews of New Orleans, focusing on Zulu and the Mardi Gras Indians. So like fascinating work within that. And I get to go to Mardi Gras. So like everyone loves that. And I'm also starting a book on the Ebony Fashion Fair. So that's where a lot of my research is right now.
As always, that was beautifully put, very eloquent. You know what you're doing. As for myself, I came to the idea of fashion studies. I think I do tend to take a little bit more of an academic approach, or like I tend to care about how academia is approaching the topic of fashion. So a little bit of background. I did my bachelor's degree in anthropology with a focus on archaeology. So I come from that material culture perspective. What I found really frustrating about that experience, though, is that I tended to write a lot about bodily adornment and clothing, aesthetics, and how that intersected with social media and the internet, which I know does not sound like it fits into archaeological practice, because archaeology is about digging in the dirt, right? So I always had this love of understanding culture through material culture. And as I attempted to learn more about how fashion and clothing fit into the archaeological record, I came to realize that it doesn't really, for a lot of reasons. First of all, clothing doesn't last in the archaeological record at all unless you're looking at really extreme environments like bogs, peat bogs, or deserts, until you hit synthetic materials that don't degrade as fast as natural fibers do. So archaeology is also a subdiscipline of anthropology, and in a lot of anthropological work, especially older ethnographies, anthropological researchers would make note of quote-unquote dress, but didn't really think it was necessary to comment on or record. So anthropology generally just hasn't really interacted with fashion in the way that I think sociology and history and now what we have, fashion studies, does. So I came to the fashion studies program wanting to understand more about how we can take an anthropological approach to understanding fashion and what it means to other people, essentially. So that's where like the academic side of it comes in. I'm pretty insistent on wanting more disciplines to kind of bridge that divide between what they think fashion is and what it actually is. Or like, do you know what I mean? Like, the tagline we agreed upon for this podcast was that fashion isn't frivolous. And so what I feel strongly about is that too many academic disciplines do think it's frivolous.
And it's something we get here at the New School a lot. Like I think any of the people I talk to across different programs, when they think about Parsons as a program, it's like, oh, those are the fashion folks, right?
Right.
And like, you know, you have people at the NSSR, what is it, the New School Social Research, something like that.
Yes.
They're doing some great research over there, but like, so are we, right? And we're not doing any research that's like, you know, any different to what they're doing in terms of the depth, in terms of thoughtfulness, in terms of like the intersectional nature of things. Like my undergrad degree is in political science, so I'm bringing a lot of that in there. You're bringing archaeology into that. So, you know, we're not doing anything that's different.
I think it's just, it has the word fashion.
It does.
So people automatically assume that we're doing something a little different.
And like, don't get me wrong, it's very fun. Everything I'm doing, for the most part, research-wise, like, I'd rather be doing that than be doing political science research at this point. I'd rather be doing this than working in politics again. So, like, it's fun, but it's also, you know, thoughtful. And like, we're getting into the research of folks whose stories have not been told. I mean, like, Katie will get into her research into the vintage community. Like, it's incredible.
Oh, yeah. I haven't talked about my research yet. Okay.
You have not, no.
Yes. So I started in a very different place than where I'm at now, but I think that's kind of the story a lot of people go through in terms of graduate school studies. But I've always had an interest in vintage clothing. Personally, I consider myself a part of that online, quote unquote, vintage community. So I'm looking at the spaces in which vintage happens. Specifically, it's a very small case study. I'm looking at a vintage pop-up market. But what's interesting about this one is that it happens on both coasts of the country, so in California and in Brooklyn, whereas a lot of the literature on vintage really privileges Europe and New York. So there hasn't been a lot of bridging geographic boundaries or pushing geographic boundaries. And I also noticed that a lot of the literature on vintage, there's two clusters of publications from the thousands and the mid-2010s, and not a lot has been updated since then, but a lot in our like social and political and economic and environmental climates have changed. And so that role of secondhand fashion and even like the idea of secondhand fashion becoming something luxurious, of playing a cultural role, has definitely shifted. And so that's what I'm hoping to kind of hone in on. Yeah.
And it's really interesting to think about how much it's changed. I think I started working in the vintage secondhand fashion space in 2016. And so the fact that there's not a lot of new research since around then, I think you were saying, it's changed so much. It's changed so much. I mean, even just across the course of the pandemic, people's shopping habits with secondhand pieces, with vintage, their relationship to pieces have changed so much. And so it's so necessary to be having these conversations, to be thinking about what you're thinking about. And also, shouts out to a current affair. That is the event
vintage pop-up market,
that Katie's talking about. So like, if any current affair folks are listening, cut the check. Come on.
They actually did just email me.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's great. I love a current affair. It is really a great event. And so like, it's really wonderful to like think about that in an academic way, because that's a space that I've spent, you know, a lot of time in. I know a lot of the vendors from this space, and like, it's really amazing to think about it from an academic way. Yeah.
Something I didn't think about before that I think is interesting now that we're talking about our research, because we talk about our research a lot in passing to each other, but have shifted my focus, and now I'm looking at like the spaces where vintage, like literally the physical space, but also like the ritual and the performance. And are you thinking about performance in your research?
Yeah, it comes up a lot.
So we have a little bit of an interesting crossover there. Like you have experience in the industry of secondhand, and I'm researching secondhand, and I'm thinking about performance. You're thinking about performance.
Yeah.
There's a reason why we get along.
Yeah. Yeah, the research definitely overlaps, and the performance side is something that like came a little bit later for me in realization to it. Like I think there's so many more performative elements across like Carnival than I think. Like I got into that because again, my family's from the Caribbean. Just going to like Eastern Parkway on the West Indian Day Parade, seeing the performative aspects of like what Carnival looks like. I didn't really like clock it until I came to this program and I was like, oh, I really like the performative side of it. I really like the subversive elements of performance. And I think it's really something that, has become a thread for both of our work.
Yeah. We are using some big words here. How are we going to?
Yeah, I feel like we might need to like attach a glossary of terms into this. We'll go back through the episode.
In the podcast
description. In the notes. Yeah.
I think that speaks to another maybe issue or just a thing that I care about personally is that we have a lot of conversations inside these walls that we're currently inside, the quote unquote institution, literally physically in the space of a university and a private university to just tack that on there.
Very important to add.
About fashion and what fashion is and the role that it plays. So how do we take that conversation elsewhere? I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in anthropology and ethnography, which is, the act of going out and participating in the things that people are doing and talking to them and kind of having that firsthand experience.
Yeah.
It's because we can sit in here and philosophize. Is that a word? Philosophize? Okay. About fashion and what it means until the cows come home. But how does it actually interact with people on an everyday basis?
Yeah.
How are people just generally engaging with fashion, with the thought of fashion? Do people engage with it?
Yeah.
These are all questions that I've thought about for a long time. And I think, to give a little bit of educational background, I come from community college. And community college's goals, especially in California, where I'm from, is to be the most accessible form of higher education. So I really care about being able to just kind of disseminate, to share, to ask other people to think about something that we also care a lot about.
Yeah. And similarly, my background is coming from our city university systems here. Shouts out to the CUNY schools. So like accessibility is so important because I think, we think about fashion in a sense that here it's maybe, I feel like we get a little bit too in the weeds on it. And sometimes I have to like pull myself out of that and like think about, okay, how are people out here interacting with the fashion system? That might be another word we need to define in the notes there, the fashion system.
The fashion system, trademark.
Yeah. But then I think about it like, I think about my parents, right? I think about, my dad, my mom, very much on the fashion system. But I think about my dad and how he interacts with fashion. And like, that's a great example of like, people who like don't really think about what they're wearing every day, but like engage with it because you have to in some way, right? And it's like those are the people that I'm really like most curious about. Like, okay, well, you're not like thinking about whatever collection Gucci put out this season, but you're still in it. And I want to know like what they're doing. That's the more interesting side of the story for me.
That makes me think about the project that I had a crisis mid-field work for my thesis. Came home and wrote an entirely new thesis proposal. Set it aside. It's okay. We're past that now. But that makes me think about. I have that question too about. It's specifically addressing like there's a lot of conversation about what the designers are doing for people, what that looks like, how they're responding to the needs of their consumers, but what are people just doing right now with what they have, right?
Yeah. And it's something that I think we both think about this because we're also TAing history of fashion simultaneously.
Yes.
And so like as we are thinking more about the history of fashion and like designers and all of these things, I end up circling back to those everyday thoughts of that. And the curriculum of that course, shouts out to Jonathan Square, has made it so that, we are thinking about fashion in a very different way, in that way. And like teaching this like next generation of designers, these undergrads who were TAing that like, fashion exists in an everyday scope. And like, there's so many voices outside of it that are not, the folks that we are historically associated in Western culture with fashion. So it's been great to, kind of flip that narrative of it.
Yeah. Can I go off on a slight tangent real quick? Okay.
Always. We will be doing that.
Oh, yes. In my history of fashion discussion section with my undergrads, I asked everyone to bring an object that represented or that they thought would fit into an exhibit that they learned about in lecture called Redressing the American Body. And the focus of that exhibit is really showing the way that people have lived in their garments and kind of challenging the way that most museums try to elevate fashion to that like fine art status. And so they all brought in an object and they shared their story about why they chose that object and what it meant to them. And as they left class, I asked them to like spend a little bit of time thinking about what would happen with these objects and how might people interpret them if we didn't have these stories that you just gave us.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Trying to really like drive home the point that the stories, like we call them micro histories in museum studies, but like these tiny stories attached, not tiny, these more focused stories attached to objects are really important and have long been overlooked in especially museum spaces.
Yeah. And that's a perfect segue to thinking about the topics that we're going to cover throughout this podcast. And like, we want to bring some folks in from time to time to talk about like curatorial activism, which, is what you were just discussing there. And a whole host of other topics. We're going to bring some people from the sustainable fashion world. We're really pulling a lot of folks in from my past life that whether they like it or not, they'll be here. They'll be here. And so we got a whole range. I don't know what else.
I think another one of the things that we want to bring up is a little bit more about how conversations about fashion are perhaps more relevant to a broader audience, right? Not just this academic kind of perspective, but thinking about fashion and the internet and what aesthetics are and what those are doing on the internet. Also kind of covering larger fashion events that happen too, so like Met Gala, New York Fashion Week.
Yeah, I'm a pop culture person, and we got a bunch of other pop culture people in this program. So it'll be interesting to cover, some of these bigger events and seeing how that side really, because that's, I think, what a lot of people interact with fashion with, like that very voguey side of things of like, oh, the Met Gala is happening. What are people wearing, right? Like, what are the famous people wearing? So I think that side of it is interesting, but looking at it from an academic perspective brings a lot of different elements of like other disciplines in there. Like there's a consumer psychology aspect to it. There's just the general like internet culture side that kind of goes back to what we were saying before. But yeah, there's so much within that, and I'm so excited to get into the pop culture stuff. I know you're less excited about.
I'm not less excited about it. I just know less about
That's fair.
Like my pop culture is like video game and comic culture.
Yeah. Which also we need to bring someone in for that as well, because like that side is also so interesting. I actually never
thought about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think about cosplay a lot. Maybe we should talk about that.
Yeah.
New topic to look forward to.
There we go.
I think we also plan on bringing in some of our fellow classmates to talk about what their research looks like and their experience in the fashion studies program.
Yeah.
It's another thing that I would love for this podcast to kind of accomplish is highlighting more fashion education, both in terms of educating the next generation of fashion designers, but also that role that fashion can play in a more academic sense.
Yeah, and on the topic of fashion education, that's might be what I'm most excited about. It's a conversation that I think I'm having all the time around, what are we teaching this next generation of designers? What are we teaching even folks who are not designers, right? Like, what are we teaching on a public education level on how people are caring for their garments, how they are storing their pieces, the life cycle of their garments, what they're doing at the end of that life cycle. And so, we'll get into some of the sustainability sides of that as well that come up out of that. Thinking about like fashion months, New York Fashion Week, all of the fashion weeks, the sustainability side of that, the pop culture side of all of that. We're bringing all the disciplines together here.
Yeah. I think we both have varying and broad interests. So it might seem like we're trying to cover a lot of topics, but I think that that's what's going to keep the podcast really interesting, actually. We both see things from a lot of different perspectives, and we both have a lot of interests. And so bringing those things together is what I'm excited about this podcast. And I also just really like to talk.
Yeah,
so.
Same. We have the two perfect people to be talking because we really enjoy it.
In fact, I run a writing group, and most of the time we just talk during writing group.
Yeah, I don't know that I've done really any writing in the writing group yet.
And one of my classmates from fashion writing, she came to writing group last week and actually wrote.
Yeah.
We were just sitting there talking.
Props to her. Props to her. I need to take a page out of her book.
How are we going to get any work done on our theses?
I don't know.
Your literature review is already done.
It is. I came into this program knowing what I was going to write. So this made everything a little bit easier. I've been out in front of this. I knew I was going to write about Carnival culture in some way. I mean, it was the only option for me. It's beautiful. It allows me to go out and like do some wonderful field work. I was either going to be in the Caribbean or New Orleans, so it was easy. It was very easy.
I mean, that's very fair.
Yeah.
I actually looked at my application essays recently, and like you have to give some idea of what you're interested in researching when you apply to graduate school programs.
Yeah.
What I started with, I mean, the through line has been vintage, or at least vintage looking.
Yeah.
But it has like jumped from topic to topic to topic.
Yeah. Again, the range. And that really speaks to, I think, the excitement that I have about this podcast is that it'll allow us a vessel to talk about our very wide, varying interests.
An outlet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think we need it. We both have all of these ideas, and this will be good to get maybe a little bit long form explorations of this and like bring other people in here who are also doing this work. Because, you know, if it's not people in industry, it's people in our program, people just who've been out here doing this work. So you won't just hear our voices as much as we like talking. There'll be some other folks. All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been the first episode of Fashion Unfolded. I can't believe it's here. It's kind of wild.
We've been talking about it all semester.
We really have. And we've in peak ADHD. We've been waiting and we've been trying to figure it out for a while, but we're here.
So there's definitely a lot to look forward to with this podcast. I think just to wrap things up real quick, we're going to be talking about a variety of topics about fashion, talking about making fashion and fashion education accessible. And you can look forward to meeting or at least hearing from a bunch of interesting people who are, like Cameron said, really doing the work in fashion studies.
Yeah.
So
follow along. It'll be fun.
Yeah. That was the first episode of Fashion Unfolded. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, my name is Katie.
My name is Cameron.
And we'll see you in the next episode.
See ya.